Unmasking your ego, a path to liberation. Have you ever stopped in the middle of a conversation, a disagreement, or even a quiet moment alone, and thought, why am I reacting like this? Why does this feel so personal? If you've ever felt that subtle sting of pride, that burning need to be right, or the fear of not being seen, you're not alone. What you're feeling is the echo of something deeper, something that often goes unnoticed but drives so much of what we do. It's called ego. Not the loud, arrogant type we associate with vanity, but the quiet, persistent identity we build around our thoughts, roles, achievements, and fears. Ego is the mask we wear to convince the world, and sometimes ourselves, that we are someone solid, someone important, someone in control. But what if that mask is what's keeping us from peace? 1. What is ego, really? The ego isn't evil. It's not something we need to hate or destroy. It's more like a survival tool, a structure the mind builds to help us navigate the world. From childhood, we are taught who we are. You're smart, you're shy, you're successful, you're not enough, you should be more. We cling to these labels. We define ourselves through our careers, our relationships, even our pain. I'm a mother. I'm a failure. I'm a victim. I'm better than them. These identities create a sense of self, but it's fragile. It depends on constant validation. The moment someone challenges our worth, the ego flares up, with defensiveness, anger, withdrawal. It says, how dare they? It whispers, I'm not safe. But what if the ego is just a story? A set of thoughts, rehearsed for so long, we've mistaken them for truth? 2. The cost of living behind the mask. Living from the ego is exhausting. It keeps us in a constant state of comparison, competition, and fear. Have you noticed how the ego always wants more recognition, more control, more certainty? But no matter how much it gets, it's never satisfied. That's because ego thrives on separation. It says, you're not like them. You're better than her, but not as good as him. Don't show your weakness. Don't let them see you fail. This separation makes us feel alone, even in a crowded room. It blocks authentic connection. Because if we are always performing a role, how can anyone ever truly know us? Maybe you felt it, that emptiness after a victory, or the shame after pretending to be okay when you weren't. That's the soul knocking. That's your true self asking for something real. 3. The Buddhist view. No self, no problem. Buddhism offers a radical insight that's both terrifying and liberating. There is no fixed self. Not in the way we imagine. The idea of self is just a flowing river of thoughts, feelings, sensations, changing moment by moment. The more we cling to a solid identity, the more we suffer. But when we let go of that grip, we find freedom. This isn't about becoming passive or losing who we are. It's about realizing that we are not our thoughts. We are not our stories. There is something deeper, an awareness behind the mask. And when we rest in that awareness, ego loses its power. 4. A personal reflection. I remember a time when I lost a job I deeply tied to my identity. It wasn't just about losing income. It felt like I lost myself. I kept thinking, who am I if I'm not this title? This role? But after months of struggle, something unexpected happened. I began to feel lighter, less driven by proving my worth. I had time to be, to notice the sky, to feel small and okay with it. That moment taught me, the ego collapses when we face the truth, that we are not in control, and that's okay. And in that humility, something beautiful is born: compassion, peace, clarity. 5. How to begin unmasking the ego. So how do we begin to unmask the ego without falling into guilt or denial? 1. Notice without judgment. Pay attention to when you feel defensive, superior, ashamed, or the need to control. These are ego signals, not flaws. Just be curious. 2. Create space through mindfulness. Just 5 minutes a day, sitting, breathing, watching thoughts without chasing them, can change everything. Mindfulness is the mirror where ego reveals itself. 3. Practice humility and humor. The ego hates being laughed at. But when we stop taking ourselves so seriously, we soften. We become teachable. 4. Connect with others without performing. Share something real. Vulnerability dissolves ego. Say, I'm not okay, or I don't know. Watch what happens when you let people see you. Unmasking the ego is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong dance. But every step toward authenticity frees us a little more. So the next time you feel the need to defend, prove, or compare, pause. Ask yourself, who is reacting right now? What if I didn't need to protect this image? Because beneath the ego's armor, you'll find not weakness, but presence. Not fear, but love. And in that quiet space, liberation begins. What if you're the one blocking your own peace? What if the biggest obstacle to your happiness is you? Not the real you, but a clever imposter. A voice that sounds like you, thinks like you, reacts for you, but isn't actually you. It's the part of you that's always striving but never arriving. Always judging, comparing, fearing, defending. It whispers, I have to be more. It screams, what if I'm not enough? That voice is ego. And here's the thing most of us never realize. We don't have to fight it. We just need to see it clearly and stop letting it run the show. 1. Meet the master manipulator. The ego isn't just arrogance or inflated pride. It's much sneakier than that. It's the inner narrator that attaches your worth to your job title. It's the panic when someone disagrees with you. It's the fear of being overlooked, forgotten, or wrong. Think about the last time someone criticized you, harshly or even gently. What rose up first? Was it curiosity or defensiveness? That sharp sting you felt? That's ego. It jumps in to protect the image you've built of yourself, even if that image is a lie you've carried for years. And the irony? The ego builds walls to keep you safe, but those walls become your prison. 2. The cost of ego's control. Here's the truth. Living from ego is like living inside a funhouse mirror. You're constantly trying to adjust your reflection so others see you a certain way, stronger, smarter, more lovable. But all the while, you're losing sight of who you really are. Ego keeps us stuck in cycles, chasing validation, afraid to slow down, comparing ourselves to others, even when we pretend we are not, feeling isolated, even when we are surrounded by people. And maybe the most heartbreaking cost of ego is that it blocks genuine connection with others and with our own inner peace. Because the ego doesn't want to be known. It wants to be admired. But admiration is hollow when it's built on a version of you that isn't real. 3. A personal story. I remember a time in my life when I thought I had everything figured out. The career, the recognition, the carefully curated image. But I was restless, disconnected, anxious in the quiet. One night, after a long day of being impressive, I sat in my car and cried. Not because something went wrong, but because I felt like a stranger to myself. That moment cracked something open. I realized I was exhausted not by life, but by pretending. Pretending to be confident. Pretending to be in control. Pretending not to care what people thought. And that's when I started to unmask the ego. Not with force, but with honesty. For what ego fears most? Awareness. Here's the ego's biggest weakness. It can't survive in the light of awareness. When you pause and say, oh, that's my ego reacting, something powerful happens. You create space. You step out of the automatic script. You begin to respond instead of react. And that space is the birthplace of freedom. Meditation helps. So does journaling. So does simply asking yourself, is this coming from fear or from truth? The more often you ask, the more you start recognizing the difference. 5. Beyond ego. Who are you really? If you're not your ego, then who are you? You're the awareness behind the noise, the quiet witness beneath the drama. You are presence. You are stillness. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. That may sound poetic, even abstract, but it's not just philosophy, it's practice. Every time you let go of being right to truly listen, admit vulnerability instead of pretending to be fine, choose peace over proving a point, you are stepping out of the ego's game and into something real. So I'll ask you again, what if the biggest thing standing between you and peace is not the world, not your past, not other people, but your own ego? And what if freedom isn't something you have to earn, but something you remember once you stop identifying with the voice in your head? You are not your ego. You are the one who sees it. And in that seeing, you are free. Thank you for taking this pause with me. If this message touched something in you, share it. Reflect on it. Sit with it. And if you're ready to go deeper on this path of inner clarity, consider subscribing. This journey isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to who you were before the ego convinced you otherwise. The lie you call you, everything you think you know about yourself, your desires, your limitations, your strengths, your story. What if it's all a lie? Not in the malicious, conspiratorial sense, but in the quiet, subtle way we build walls around our identity without even realizing it. You see, there's a hidden architect shaping how you see the world, how you see yourself. It whispers in your thoughts, edits your memories, and filters your emotions. It's called the ego. And today, we are going to expose it. Not to attack it, but to finally see it, so that you can begin to live a life that's not built on illusion, but on truth. One, the ego, the hidden architect of your identity. Let's be clear, the ego isn't evil. It's just misunderstood. The ego is a psychological structure, a mental map you've built over time to survive, to belong, to feel in control. It starts forming in childhood, piecing together who you are from experiences, praises, rejections, social cues. And it becomes incredibly convincing. I'm a high achiever. I'm not creative. I can't trust people. I'm always the strong one. I'm broken. These aren't facts. They are constructs. The ego's job is to maintain this identity at all costs, even if it's painful. Because the ego doesn't want you to be happy. It wants you to be right. It wants you to be consistent. Even if what you're consistently believing is destroying your peace. 2. How the ego shapes your desires and fears. Ever noticed how your desires often mimic the world around you? You want success, not necessarily because it's meaningful, but because the ego fears being average. You crave love, not just for connection, but because the ego panics at the thought of being alone or unchosen. Even your fears, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of looking foolish, are rarely about real danger. They're about ego preservation. Here's the kicker. The ego confuses survival with significance. It thinks being liked equals being safe. Being admired equals being valuable. Being in control equals being worthy. But that's not living. That's managing a brand. 3. A story that changed my lens. I used to think I was a driven person. I wore it like a badge of honor. Always working, always producing, always moving forward. But underneath that drive? Anxiety. A fear that if I stopped, even for a second, I'd fall behind. That I'd be seen as lazy. That I'd lose my edge. That maybe I wasn't enough without my achievements. It took burning out, mentally and emotionally, to realize. I wasn't chasing my passion. I was escaping my insecurity. That drive wasn't my true self. It was my ego in a tailored suit, playing the role of a successful person. The moment I saw it for what it was, I could finally ask, what do I actually want when I'm not trying to prove anything? And that question changed everything. 4. The radical perspective shift. So what's the alternative? It's not about killing the ego. That's just more ego, trying to conquer itself. It's about disidentifying with it. It's about realizing that your thoughts are not you. Your roles are not you. Your trauma is not you. Your titles, your achievements, your failures, your likes and dislikes. All of it is temporary. All of it is conditioned. What's real, what's you, is the awareness behind it all. The stillness that watches your thoughts rise and fall. The presence that remains when everything else changes. When you live from that place, not in theory, but in practice, something extraordinary happens. You stop being reactive. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing change. And you begin to live. Fully. Authentically. Freely. 5. Breaking the illusion. Practices that help. So how do you begin to step out of the ego's illusion? Here are 3 practices that have helped me, and countless others, start the shift. 1. Radical self-inquiry. Ask deeper questions. Not how can I succeed, but why do I need to? Not what do I want, but who told me I should want that? 2. Stillness. Meditation isn't about silencing your thoughts. It's about noticing them, and not believing all of them. When you stop identifying with every voice in your head, you start hearing something deeper. 3. Surrender. This one's hard for the ego because it loves control. But sometimes, peace comes not from fixing everything, but from releasing the need to. Everything you think you are might be a well-polished mask, but that doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you're ready to wake up. What if the freedom you've been chasing isn't found in becoming more, but in realizing you were never the ego to begin with? So today, I invite you to pause, to get quiet, to ask, who am I beyond what I've been told? Because behind the lies of ego, there's a quiet, steady truth, and it's been waiting for you all along. The ego builds illusions. Your soul holds the truth. Subscribe to return to what's real. Every week, a step closer to freedom. Unmasking the ego, the path to true self-liberation. Do you ever feel like you're constantly striving? Trying to be a little more successful, a little more loved, a little more together than you really feel inside? Maybe you find yourself comparing your life to others, wondering if you're falling behind or if you're missing something. Or maybe there's this quiet voice in your head, always whispering, you should have done better. You're not enough. Don't mess this up. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. That subtle tension of needing to prove, of needing to protect, isn't just stress. It's ego. And no, I don't mean ego as in arrogance or pride. I'm talking about the deeper kind. The ego that hides behind perfectionism, people-pleasing, anxiety, or even self-doubt. Today, we're not just going to talk about it. We are going to gently unmask it. Because behind that mask is something far more real. A version of you that's not driven by fear, but by truth. What is ego, really? Let's start with the basics. Your ego is the psychological identity you've built over time. It's not who you are, it's who you think you are. It's the collection of labels, stories, and roles you've taken on. I'm a leader. I'm a failure. I'm the strong one. I'm too sensitive. I'm the one who always has to hold it all together. The ego builds this identity not to harm you, but to protect you. It believes that if it can just control how the world sees you, you'll be safe. But here's the catch. The ego's protection comes with a cost. Because in constantly curating, comparing, and controlling, we lose touch with who we truly are. To the invisible chains of ego. Let's get real for a second. How many decisions in your life have been made from a place of fear? Fear of judgment. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough. It might look like overworking to prove your worth, or staying silent just to be accepted, or endlessly scrolling through social media, feeling like your life doesn't quite measure up. That's not you failing. That's the ego doing its job. It's trying to keep your image intact, even if it means suffocating your truth. And the most dangerous part? Most of us don't even realize it's happening. We think it's just life. We think this anxiety is normal. We think striving for more is a virtue. But what if it's not ambition that's driving you? What if it's ego, afraid of stillness? 3. A personal turning point. I remember a time when I was constantly hustling, always reaching for the next goal, the next title, the next I did it moment. But no matter how much I achieved, it never felt like enough. The applause faded quickly. The peace never stayed. Until one day, in the middle of a quiet walk, it hit me. I wasn't chasing success. I was running from the fear of being nobody. That was the moment I began asking deeper questions. Who am I without all the roles? Who am I without the praise? Who am I when I stop performing? And the answer wasn't grand or dramatic. It was stillness. It was presence. It was peace. 4. How to unmask the ego. So how do we begin to break free? Not by fighting the ego, but by seeing it. Here are a few simple practices to help you do just that. 1. Pause when you feel reactive. That moment you feel the urge to defend, compare, or prove, pause. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to protect right now? Often, it's not truth, it's image. 2. Get curious about your inner critic. That voice in your head saying you're not good enough? That's not your truth. It's an old echo. Ask, whose voice is this, really? Where did I learn to be so hard on myself? 3. Practice moments of stillness. Just 5 minutes a day. Sit. Breathe. Notice your thoughts without grabbing onto them. Ego needs movement to survive. Stillness reveals it. 4. Tell the truth, especially the small ones. Say, I don't know. Say, I need help. Say, that hurt. Honesty is the ego's undoing. Because the ego survives on masks. Truth takes the mask off. 5. Who you are without ego. Here's what I've learned. The more you unmask your ego, the more you meet yourself. Not the curated version. Not the on version. But the quiet, rooted, steady version. The version that doesn't need to impress to feel worthy. The version that isn't afraid of being seen as flawed. The version that can sit in the unknown and still feel whole. That's freedom. Not a dramatic transformation. Not some perfect enlightenment. Just the quiet realization that you were never broken. You were just buried beneath layers of fear. So I'll ask you, what might happen if you stopped trying to be someone and simply remembered who you already are? Because underneath the striving, comparing, and defending, there is peace. There is clarity. There is you. And maybe today is the day. You stop running from it. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. Subscribe for more mindful reflections every week. The Silent Architect. How your ego builds your reality. Have you ever noticed that there's a voice inside your head that never stops talking? It narrates your life like a never-ending podcast, judging, justifying, comparing, analyzing. You wake up in the morning and it's already there. I should have slept earlier. I have so much to do today. What will they think of me? I'm not doing enough. I deserve better. That voice is what many spiritual traditions have called the ego. And today, we are going to explore not just what the ego is, but how it's secretly shaping your reality, moment by moment, like a silent architect you never hired, but somehow always obey. Let's start with a simple but unsettling question. What if most of what you believe about yourself isn't actually true? The personality you defend, the labels you wear, the story you tell others, and even yourself. I'm this kind of person. I could never do that. I'm not good enough for that. Who decided these things? When were they written? You see, the ego is clever. It doesn't come wearing a name tag. It doesn't announce, hey, I'm the part of you that's afraid of not being enough. No, it hides in plain sight. It masquerades as your voice of reason, your ambition, even your wounded pride. It shows up when someone gives you constructive feedback, and instead of hearing it, you feel defensive. It whispers when you scroll through social media and compare your life to someone else's highlight reel. It clings to every title you've earned, every opinion you've formed, every scar you've buried, until those things begin to feel like who you are. But here's the truth. The ego is not you. It's an identity your mind has built to survive, to belong, to be seen. And while it may have helped you in the past, it's now the very thing keeping you small. So let's unpack this a little more. The ego is fundamentally a process, a loop of thoughts centered around the idea of self. It's not evil. It's not bad. But it is limited. It's the part of you that says, I am this kind of person. I need to be right. I can't look weak. I must win. I can't lose face. And that structure creates an entire reality. Your reactions, your expectations, even your suffering. For example, have you ever lost your temper over something minor, like someone cutting you off in traffic or being ignored in a meeting? That emotional spike isn't always about the event itself. It's the ego feeling attacked, threatened, invisible. Or think of the last time you felt deeply insecure. Was it really about your skills? Or was it the ego fearing irrelevance, fearing being less than in a world obsessed with more? Now, here's the heavy cost of letting ego run the show. It disconnects you from others, from reality, and from your deeper self. Because when you're always busy protecting a fragile image, you stop showing up as your full, authentic being. You avoid vulnerability. You resist growth because it might mean admitting you're wrong. You cling to achievements for worth, relationships for validation, and control for security. But none of these things ever satisfy the ego for long. It always wants more praise, more power, more certainty. And that hunger never ends. So what's the alternative? Is it possible to live without ego? Not entirely, but it is possible to become aware of it, and that awareness is revolutionary. It's the moment you catch yourself reacting, and instead of following the old script, you pause and ask, is this my truth, or is this just my ego reacting? That space, between stimulus and response, is where your freedom lives. And it begins with a radical kind of honesty. Ask yourself, why do I feel the need to prove myself all the time? What would it feel like to just be, without comparing, without defending? Who am I beyond my achievements, my fears, my opinions? These aren't easy questions, but they're the doorway to something deeper, to a life where you are no longer trapped in the prison of I, me, mine. A life where you can listen without defending, fail without collapsing, love without needing to be needed. I'm not here to promise you some perfect, ego-free enlightenment, but I am inviting you into a quiet rebellion, a daily, mindful return to presence, because every moment you catch your ego in action is a moment you reclaim your life. And when enough of those moments stack up, you begin to live not from fear or identity, but from awareness, from compassion, from clarity. That's what this journey is really about. So next time the voice in your head starts comparing, defending, or overthinking, pause, breathe, and gently remind yourself, this voice is not the truth. It's just the echo of an old story. You don't have to believe everything your ego says. You can write a new script, one grounded not in illusion, but in freedom. Because the ego may be the silent architect of your reality, but you are the one who decides whether to keep building its walls, or to finally walk beyond them. Ego's grip, everyday traps and breakthrough moments. Have you ever noticed how some of your most stressful thoughts seem oddly familiar? Like a loop you didn't choose but can't stop playing? You find yourself obsessing over a decision you already made. You replay a conversation, again and again, wondering if you should have said something smarter. Or maybe you lie awake at night worrying about how others see you, your performance, your image, your worth. That loop, that's your ego. Not ego as in arrogance or narcissism, but ego as the silent architect of your inner world. The storyteller in your mind that's constantly trying to protect, control, and prove something. The ego clings, not because it's evil, but because it believes that control equals safety. Let's pause here. Why do we cling so tightly to being right? Why do we get defensive over the smallest critique? Why does our heart race when we feel ignored or misunderstood? The answer lies in how the ego creates a sense of identity. It whispers, if I'm right, I'm worthy. If they like me, I'm safe. If I win, I matter. And here's the trick. The ego isn't inherently bad, it's just outdated. It evolved to protect us, to help us survive in a world of danger and competition. But today, most of the battles we are fighting aren't physical. They are internal, emotional, invisible. Take perfectionism, for example. You set impossibly high standards for yourself. You never feel like your work is done or good enough. Deep down, it's not because you love excellence. It's because the ego says, if I'm perfect, I'll finally be enough. Or think about overthinking. The endless planning. The overanalyzing. The what-ifs. The ego believes that if it can just think hard enough, it can prevent failure or embarrassment or loss. But all it ends up doing is creating mental chaos. And then there's the classic need to be right. Whether it's an argument with a loved one or a heated post on social media, we often find ourselves fighting not for truth, but for ego validation. Because to admit we are wrong, that feels like ego death. But here's the beautiful paradox. It's in these exact moments, when we feel most triggered, most rigid, that we are standing at the doorway of transformation. Let me share a story. A woman I once met had a long-standing feud with her brother. They hadn't spoken in years over something that, in hindsight, was small. But her ego wouldn't let go. He needs to apologize first. I did nothing wrong. And so the silence stretched on. One day, she sat in a meditation retreat. Just silence, breath, stillness. And suddenly, like a burst of light, she saw the truth. Her need to be right had kept her lonely. Her pain wasn't from the conflict. It was from her attachment to the ego story. She reached out that evening. The moment she said, I miss you, something inside her softened. And the war, for both of them, ended with a simple act of surrender. That was a breakthrough moment. These moments don't always look dramatic. Sometimes they show up in quiet realizations. When you stop mid-argument and ask, what really matters here, winning or connecting? When you look in the mirror and say, I'm enough, even if I mess this up. When you catch yourself comparing your life to someone else's and gently smile at the absurdity of it. These are moments the ego loosens its grip. And in that space, it may only last a second, you glimpse something bigger than the ego. Something still, spacious, kind. You glimpse who you are without the performance, without the mask. And that's liberation. Let me ask you this. What would your day look like if you didn't need to prove anything to anyone? What kind of peace would you feel if you trusted that your worth was not up for debate? You see, ego clings out of fear, but awareness moves from love, from presence, from wholeness. And the journey isn't about getting rid of the ego, it's about seeing through it, noticing its patterns, gently questioning its voice, and choosing not to obey every thought it throws at you. The ego will always whisper, be more. But your soul already knows, you are enough. So the next time you feel the need to control, to overthink, to prove, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, not what does my ego need, but what does this moment need? That's where your power is, not in the armor of perfection, but in the soft strength of awareness. Dismantling the illusion, practical steps to awareness. Have you ever caught yourself spiraling into anger, or suddenly feeling offended, and then wondering, why did I react that way? That moment, when you pause and observe, isn't just self-awareness. It's the beginning of liberation. Let's talk about ego, not as something evil or to be destroyed, but as a lens we often forget we are wearing. It narrates our story, defends our identity, and reacts from old wounds. And most of the time, we don't even know it's in control. So how do we start to dismantle this illusion? How do we begin to live with more clarity, presence, and freedom? Let me walk you through 3 steps that have transformed the way I experience my inner world: mindfulness, inquiry, and emotional intelligence. Each of them sounds simple, but when practiced sincerely, they become radical acts of inner revolution. Step 1. Mindfulness as a mirror. Imagine holding up a mirror, not to your face, but to your thoughts. Mindfulness is exactly that, noticing what arises in the mind without immediately trying to fix, fight, or feed it. Most of us live like we're inside a storm, unaware that the storm isn't the world, it's our thoughts about the world. Mindfulness teaches us to step back, to observe instead of react. Let's say you're in traffic. Someone cuts you off. Instantly, your chest tightens, and thoughts rush in. How rude. People are so selfish. Without mindfulness, we ride that wave of anger, maybe even yell or curse. But with mindfulness, something shifts. You see the thought arise. You feel the sensation in your chest. And instead of fusing with it, you watch. That watching is powerful. It creates space. And in that space, you have choice. Mindfulness doesn't mean you won't feel anger or pain. It means you won't become anger or pain. Step 2. The power of inquiry. Once you've learned to observe your thoughts, you can begin to gently question them. This is where the illusion begins to fall apart. Inquiry asks, is that thought really true? Who would I be without this belief? What am I defending, and why? Take perfectionism, for example. The ego loves to whisper, you're not enough unless you do it perfectly. But when you pause and ask, says who? The spell weakens. When you examine the belief, you often find it's inherited. Maybe it came from a parent, a teacher, or society. It isn't your truth. It's just a thought that's been running on autopilot. The practice of inquiry doesn't give you all the answers, but it peels back the layers. It reminds you that not every thought deserves your loyalty. You are not your beliefs. You are the awareness questioning them. Step 3. Emotional intelligence, from reaction to presence. Have you noticed how fast we can go from calm to chaos? A single word, a mistext, a strange look, and suddenly, the ego flares up. They don't respect me. I'm being rejected. But what if we didn't react right away? What if we allowed ourselves to feel, without fusing with the story? Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing feelings. It's about being wise with them. Recognizing that emotions are signals, not dictators. That not every emotional surge requires an external response. You can feel disappointed and still choose grace. You can feel triggered and still choose silence. You can feel angry and still respond with compassion. This is the power of presence. You're no longer on autopilot. You become the one behind the wheel again. Let's be honest. This work isn't easy. You won't dismantle your ego in a weekend retreat or a few meditation sessions. It's a lifelong unraveling, a dance between forgetting and remembering. But here's what I've learned. The more you observe, question, and soften into presence, the more the ego loses its grip. You become less obsessed with being right and more curious about being real. You stop chasing validation and start offering understanding. You begin to see others, not through the lens of judgment, but through the eyes of shared humanity. A story to remember. There's a Zen parable I often think about. A student asked his master, "How can I become enlightened?" The master replied, "When you let go of the idea that you need to become anything." That's it. So much of ego's trap is this constant striving, trying to be somebody, to prove something, to win approval. But the path to awareness isn't about adding more. It's about subtracting the noise. And when you let go, even just a little, what you find isn't emptiness. It's peace. Spacious, grounded, luminous peace. So, I'll leave you with this. What thought, today, are you believing without question? What emotion are you reacting from, instead of sitting with? And what story is your ego telling you, that your heart knows isn't true? The illusion begins to dissolve the moment you become curious. Let that curiosity guide you. The freedom of no self, embracing your true nature. Have you ever paused for a moment and asked yourself, who am I, really, beneath the roles, the labels, the expectations? Most of us walk through life wearing masks. Not because we are fake, but because somewhere along the way, we were taught we had to be someone successful, someone liked, someone right. And so the ego, like a narrator with a shaky pen, writes our story for us. It says, you are your name, your job, your past, your failures, your image. And we believe it. But what if that narrator is unreliable? What if the ego isn't you, but just a story you've rehearsed so long it started to feel true? That's where the freedom of no self begins. It's a strange idea, right? No self? Doesn't that sound like erasing who you are? Like dissolving your identity? Not quite. In Buddhist wisdom, no self doesn't mean nothing exists. It means that the self you cling to, the one who's always comparing, defending, proving, is not as solid as it pretends to be. It's a collection of patterns, thoughts, reactions, not your essence. Here's a way to picture it. Imagine standing in front of a still lake. When the water is calm, it reflects the sky perfectly. But when the ego stirs, through fear, pride, or desire, it's like a stone thrown into that water. Ripples distort the reflection. We stop seeing clearly. We start reacting, defending, controlling. But when the ego quiets, what's left? Stillness, clarity, presence. Let's go deeper. Beyond the label, what remains when the ego's narrative fades? Think about it. What's left when the roles fall away? If you weren't the boss, or the mother, or the one who always has it together, would you still matter? Yes. In fact, you might emerge more clearly than ever. Because beneath all those titles is a being who simply is. A quiet, observing presence. The one who notices thoughts but isn't controlled by them. The one who feels emotions but isn't swallowed by them. You're not your story. You're the space that holds it. And in that space, you're free. You're not bound by who you think you should be. You're not limited by your past. You're not driven by the need to impress or prove. You just are. And strangely enough, that's where real power lives. Authentic living. How liberation from ego unlocks genuine joy and purpose. Have you ever done something purely out of joy? No one was watching, no one was grading, no one was applauding, and afterward, you felt alive? That's what life beyond ego feels like. It's not empty, it's full. Not full of noise, but of meaning. When we are not performing for the world, we begin to ask deeper questions. What truly matters to me? What makes my soul feel light? What brings peace, not just applause? This is authentic living. It's not about abandoning the world, but meeting it differently. With less armor, more heart. With curiosity instead of control. You begin to act not from fear or pressure, but from alignment, from a place that feels right, even if no one claps. In this space, you don't need a persona. You don't need to be the smartest or the kindest or the most enlightened. You just show up, raw, real, awake. And surprisingly, that's what people resonate with most. Not the polished version of you, but the present one. The interconnectedness, realizing your place in a larger tapestry of existence. There's another gift waiting beyond the ego, and it's this: connection. When we let go of the illusion of separation, that we are alone, isolated, independent selves fighting for our place, we begin to see something different. We start to feel how deeply we are woven into the world. You're not just in the universe, you are part of it. Like a wave is not separate from the ocean. The tree doesn't stand alone. It drinks from the soil, breathes in sunlight, offers oxygen to you. You don't stand alone either. Your thoughts, your choices, your presence, it touches others in ways you can't always see. The more the ego loosens its grip, the more this truth becomes real. You move from me to we. From how do I win to how do we thrive together. And in that shift, the tightness in your chest begins to soften. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. You are the world. Just one thread, yes, but an essential one. So, what would it look like, right now, to live just one moment without ego? What if, in this very breath, you didn't need to be right, didn't need to be perfect, didn't need to impress anyone? What if, being you, just as you are, aware, present, connected, is enough? That's not a loss. That's liberation. That's what the Buddhists mean when they speak of no self. Not nothingness, but spaciousness. Not absence, but authenticity. Not detachment from life, but a deeper, more loving engagement with it. And maybe, just maybe, that's where your truest joy has been waiting all along. If this sparks something within you, maybe sit with it a little longer today. Let the noise settle. Watch the lake grow still. And listen. Your true self may not speak in words, but it's always been here, gently waiting to be remembered. Living liberated, a new way forward. Have you ever noticed how even in our quietest moments, there's still a voice narrating everything? You wake up, and before your feet even hit the floor, that voice is already chattering, reminding you of who you are, what's expected, what you didn't do yesterday, and what could go wrong today. It calls itself you. It speaks in your name. But is it really you? This is the voice of the ego, not evil, not an enemy, but often an unconscious passenger steering the wheel of your life. And when we begin to live from awareness rather than that voice, we start to touch something astonishing: liberation. But what does it mean to live liberated? It doesn't mean leaving society or renouncing your job or family. It means walking through life awake. It means noticing when the ego wants to react, and choosing presence instead. It means letting go of being right just to be kind. It means meeting yourself over and over again, not as a fixed identity, but as unfolding awareness. So how do we integrate this awareness into daily life? It begins in the smallest of things. When someone interrupts you mid-sentence, can you notice the irritation before it becomes a reaction? When you scroll social media and feel envy rise, can you observe that emotion instead of drowning in it? That's mindfulness, not a trendy practice, but a revolutionary pause. Awareness is not just sitting on a cushion. It's standing in line, hearing your impatience whisper, and instead of feeding it, you breathe. You smile inwardly. You remember, this moment is your practice. Living liberated means staying conscious of your ego, not to fight it, but to recognize it as just one voice in a much bigger field of being. Sometimes it screams, they disrespected you, or you're falling behind. And sometimes it whispers more seductively, you deserve this. You're better than them. But awareness hears those voices and doesn't blindly obey. It's like stepping out of the movie and realizing you're not the character, you're the screen. And when you live from the screen, not the story, something remarkable happens. You suffer less. Let's talk about challenges. Conflict, criticism, failure. They don't stop when you become more aware. But your relationship with them transforms. Imagine someone lashes out at you, unfairly, maybe even cruelly. The ego wants revenge or retreat. But awareness? It listens. It breathes. It might still respond, with clarity, with boundaries, but not with poison. When you're no longer trapped in defending the self, You find power in flexibility. You can grow without shame. You can hear hard truths without collapsing. That's strength, not egoic toughness, but conscious resilience. And here's something beautiful. Living liberated doesn't make you less human. It makes you more. More open. More compassionate. More real. Without ego's armor, your joy becomes fuller. You don't need to prove you're special to feel worthy. You don't need everyone to agree with you to feel peace. You stop outsourcing your identity to external approval, and instead, anchor it in presence. But let's be honest, this isn't a one-time switch. It's a lifelong unfolding. There will be days when the ego takes the wheel again, and you catch yourself mid-judgment, mid-resentment. And that's okay. The path of liberation isn't perfection. It's awareness, again and again. Each moment you choose consciousness over reaction, presence over performance, you are reshaping the course of your life. Not with dramatic gestures, but with gentle, courageous returning. And the truth is, you don't become liberated. You remember that you already are. Beneath the layers of story, defense, ambition, and fear, there is something quiet, vast, and timeless. It watches your thoughts without judgment. It holds your emotions without resistance. It smiles at your trying and welcomes your surrender. That is your true nature. And when you live from that place, not constantly, but more and more, you find yourself walking through the world with a different kind of freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be with whatever arises and still be at peace. So ask yourself, what would it look like to live just one day from awareness? What would shift in how you speak, how you listen, how you treat others, and yourself? This is your invitation to begin again. Not tomorrow. Not when you're more spiritual or ready. Now, right here, in this very breath, is your first step forward into a new way of being. You don't need to escape your life. You just need to meet it, with presence. And slowly, moment by moment, you'll discover the truest liberation was never out there. It was always within.